Okay, let's continue with our discussion on the installation of the bind server for our infrastructure. The first thing that we are required to do is to install the packages. The packages are bind and bind chroot. Yes. Okay, the other thing that we need to look into is etc sysconfig name. If you see this variable root dir equal to var name chroot, it means that the bind server when run will chroot itself to this folder. So bind is going to chroot to var name chroot, and it will not have access to any file or folder outside this. Okay, so let's coming on to var name chroot etc. Here we should have the configuration file name.conf, which is missing. There is a good point that bind package, when you install it, provide you some sample configurations, so we will make use of that. User share doc bind sample etc named.conf, and other file we just copy them over here. Now let's have a look into the two files. Name.rfc file has defined the local zones and other zones that you want to add that could be present in this file. And the other is named.conf. So named.conf file provided as a sample file has the sample configuration that you can use. So we'll be modifying a few things. Right now let's add an Acl Labs. Acl is actually an access control lists which define a name corresponding to a set of networks. So whenever I will be calling the name labs, it actually means the network 192.168.1.0/24. Directory means the working directory. As soon as we start the bind, whenever we are calling any file by the name, it will actually be called inside var name chroot and var named. Var name chroot because it's already chrooted, and var named is the working directory that we have specified. So these are the dump files, statistic file, and memory statistic files. One important parameter is listen on port 53, which says listen on port 53, on which interfaces by default it is listening only on localhost. So in case you want it to work as a DNS server, definitely you'll have to listen at least on one of the interfaces. Listening on localhost means it'll work only for this particular machine. So we have modified it to any. So now bind when started will be listening on all the interfaces. Right now we have 4 interfaces corresponding to one interface corresponding to every environment, every router. On IPv6 we don't want it right now, so just disable it. Access restriction: allow query localhost, allow query cache localhost. Allow query means NS lookup or resolution can be made by which set of networks. So right now it's supporting only for localhost, and query cache only for localhost. Recursion equal to yes means if I am asking the name server to resolve a particular domain, for example yahoo.com, either the DNS server is going to resolve me or provide me an output of yahoo.com, or let me clear it. Okay, CLS is there. Okay, so if I'm trying to resolve from my machine, I'm trying to resolve from this DNS server yahoo.com, and the recursion is enabled, it will either provide me the name IP address corresponding to the name of yahoo.com, or it will fail. So yahoo.com, as it exists, so it will provide me the details. And for example, if I talk about nslookupabc.com, in case it doesn't exist, it will say no, doesn't exist. In case recursion is set to no and I try to resolve yahoo.com from this DNS server, this DNS server is going to provide me a referral that this client machine will use for the resolution of yahoo.com. So effectively, recursion equal to no says iterative query, and will provide me a referral rather than the actual resolution. That referral can be used by the client for the resolution of the name that the client is requesting. DNSSEC enable for security purpose, we can leave them by default, and logging part let them be as it is by default. Coming on to views, for example, we have the same domain example.com, which is accessed by multiple zones, and we have for example, we have 3 environments which are running in 3 different countries, in US, in India, in UK. So if we are resolving ns.yahoo.com, or if we are resolving server1.example.com, it could resolve to multiple IP addresses, one corresponding to every zone. Okay, let's understand the scenario. We have a zone example.com corresponding to view 1, view 2. View 1 will be applicable to the clients that are resolving from the network 1.0, and view 2 will be applicable to the clients which are trying to resolve from 192.168.2.0. So clients in view 2 will have the resolution as 2.2.2.2, and in view 1 will have a different IP address, 1.1.1.1. So it says split zones. The same zone is visible as a different IP address to different networks. This is how the views work in DNS. Okay, right now we have 3 views by default. Localhost resolver, which says match client localhost, means in case the query is coming from localhost, it will go to view localhost resolver. Recursion is enabled, so we can resolve Yahoo and everything. And zone dot in this is a type of hint zone, which says in case this DNS server doesn't understand a zone, it is going to find the name server corresponding to the zone from this file. Include simply says include all the zones present in this file. We had a look into the file, and this file has localhost.local domain and other default zones. View internal says match clients local nets, which says in case the client is in any of the networks corresponding to it, allow him the query. So we will just rename view internal as labs. Match clients labs. Why labs? Because we have defined it above as an ACL for 192.168.1.0/24 network. So what about the recursion? Yes, it is enabled, and it should be enabled so that I can resolve yahoo.com and other sites, and I have access to these zones. There could be some additional zones that has been specified over here. Right now I'll just remove them. I don't need this DDNS key as of now. We'll have a separate session for that. View external will be for all others which are not specified above. So match clients any, it says recursion is no. So in case this DNS server is able to resolve the query, that is fine, but there will be no recursion. It could provide a referral, and these are the zones corresponding to it. Right now I have removed all the external zones. I'll just save it and restart. Now, one thing I missed. Okay, what I just did was I deleted a rule corresponding to DNS entries. So in your default scenario, the rule will not be there. I'll add the rule. So first of all, how do I try to resolve from a particular name server? Let me try to resolve yahoo.com from localhost. And it resolved me to the IP addresses. So my name server in localhost or infra server is working fine. Let me see to which interfaces is it listening. I specified it to listen on all the interfaces, so that is good. Okay, let me try to resolve from my Windows desktop. Okay, and let's look up. Now this machine is trying to coordinate with the DNS server, but the request timed out because the firewall on the infrastructure doesn't allow the queries or doesn't allow the input traffic on UDP port 53. So let me just create a firewall rule. -I to input chain, -P protocol UDP, -D port 53, -S 192.168.1.0/24, -J accept, and service IP tables save. Now if I'm trying to resolve from it, it says query refused. I was able to reach to the DNS server on it. I tried the resolution, but the query was refused. The reason is first of all, the view corresponding to it is labs. I was refused the query. So what I need to done is allow query from labs. Labs is the ACL that I defined above, and allow query cache. And just reload the named. Okay, now let's try to resolve once again. And yes, this time I was able to resolve because the view corresponding to me is labs, and I allowed query as well as query cache. So I'm able to resolve it. Let me try if I can resolve yahoo.com. And yes, I am able to resolve yahoo.com also. So this DNS is working fine for my environment now. The one thing that I am missing is my local zones in it. So let us try to add one more zone to it, which will be labs.local. So first thing, modify or create a zone. We can take any of it as a template. I just copied these. So first thing that I need to do is create a zone corresponding to labs.local. It will be type master and the file associated will be named dot labs. Allow update, allow no one to update it. So let's remove it. This is not required. The other will be the PTR record. PTR PTR record, when you are specifying it as a zone, it is specified in the reverse way. Like I'm talking about 192.168.1.x, so the name will be 1.168.192.1 in addr.arpa is constant. Okay, so now I'm required to create two files. If you want just a template, name.localhost and name.loopback can be used for that. Let me move to where named. Here we can see the zones cp minus p named.loopback. Let's copy it to named.192 and named.localhost to named.labs. Named.labs. So it says default time to live in the cache. Default will be 1 day. So at the rate means the zone that we specified. In our example, it will be labs.local. At the rate means zone once again, and this is actually the mail address. So let's just mark it at root labs local. Please make sure that dot at the end is required. Serial number, refresh. So the slave DNS server or the cache DNS server is going to refresh itself after every 1 day. Retry. So in case after 1 day the refresh fails, the cache or the slave DNS will try the resolution or try the update once again in 1 hour, and it will continue trying after 1 hour until it succeeds. In case it doesn't get an update from the master server in 1 week, the query cache will be cleared up, and 3 hours is minimum. So okay, now coming on to the records. NS says name server, A says address. In case there is space or no name, it specifies the zone itself. In our case, it is labs.local. So name server corresponding to labs.local is labs.local. Dash in A or at the rate in A says that the name labs.local will be resolving to. Let's change the IP address to 192.168.1.205. This is my machine's IP address. So we have the first entry in it, or I would like to add one more entry which is corresponding to infra. In A goes to 192.168.1.205. I save it and increase the serial number by 1. The other part is named dot 192, which is corresponding to the reverse lookup. At the rate, as you know, corresponds to the zone, which will be labs.local. Mail address, you might like to understand why we are using root.labs.local. This is the syntax of it. Instead of at the rate, it's start over here. The pattern is same, refresh, retry. One 192.168.1.205. We don't have any entry for IPv6. PTR, okay, PTR record corresponding to it goes to please make a note of dot at the end, otherwise it will be in addr.arpa. Here we have to specify only the last part of it, last octet, which is 205. Okay, we have modified both the zones and created an entry in named let me show you, var named chroot etc named dot labs dot zones. So these zones I'll be required to add them to a corresponding view which should be able to resolve them. Named dot conf, and I allow the resolution from the view labs. This view, if you want, it can be accessible also from the localhost view. etc. So I did two things. I created zone files for it. I created two zone files. I created a conf file for it, and I added that conf file for the zone in name.conf. Write and quit. And I just will restart or reload named. Now nslookup labs.local 127.0.0.1, and it resolves to the right IP address 192.168.1.205. Do you see one thing now? It's authoritative for it, so it's not displaying non-authoritative. Now I'll try to resolve. Yeah, I tried to resolve yahoo.com. It's displayed non-authoritative because it is not hosted at 192.168.1.205. So nslookup labs.local, and here I am able to resolve it as an authoritative name server. I am not able to resolve INFR because this record doesn't exist, or if you say NS, it's not able to resolve. The reason being it's not yet present. So what if we want to add it? Move to var named, and I open the named dot labs file, and in this I will have to add one more record which says NS in A goes to 192.168.1.205. And one more thing, in case I want Okay, now I have two name servers corresponding to this zone. One will be called just as the same name, labs.local. Other will be called ns.labs.local. I can have multiple name servers. It could be ns2, ns3 or so. So I just save it. Every time you are modifying an entry in DNS, just increase the serial number. And you do the named reload. And now if I try to resolve ns.labs.local, it resolves. Other thing that I didn't specify was there could be a wildcard entry which says star in A goes to, and let me specify the entry for WinXP client machine also. It's 201. Now I have a wildcard entry for star. I'll show you the impact. /etc init.d named reload. Now if I'm trying to resolve xyz, it is going to resolve to this name. It could be anything. So this is actually the impact of wildcard. Whatever name I'll be calling it, by default it goes to 205. And other entry that I created was for WinXP, that goes to 192.168.1.201. And with this, the generic setup with the views of the name server is completed. In the meantime, I'll create the zones corresponding to in.labs, us.labs, and corresponding to the DMZ environment. And okay, let me tell you one more thing, because I am not yet able to differentiate you about the views. Let me try to differentiate you. Where named chroot etc named.conf. I think you are not yet demonstrated about the views. From the localhost resolver, I am just removing one file which is corresponding to the labs. So I have not yet restarted nslookup ns.labs.local from 127.0.0.1. It should succeed because I have not yet restarted named. As per the previous configuration, it was allowing the resolution of labs.local and all the domains inside it from localhost. So I will just restart or reload the configuration. Oh, it failed because if you see my path, I am inside var name chroot. Now if we run the same command ns.labs.local, it says non-existent domain. The reason is I have removed it from the configuration. Chroot etc named.conf. Here, this is the thing I commented. So in case I have a view for localhost resolver, I will not have a view to labs.local domain. Okay, with this I have a generic setup And okay, one more thing that I would be required to do and I forgot to mention was, now I'll be using my own DNS server 1.205 for any resolution. In case it fails on it, I don't want any other DNS as of now. And now if I try to resolve WinXP, it gets resolves. If I try to resolve any name, because I had a wildcard entry, so it resolves to infra server. Let me remove the wildcard entry because this is not good. Because this actually exposes your server in case a person doesn't know any of the servers inside it. At least he knows which is your generic server for any wildcard entry, so it's not good to place it. /etc init.d named reload. Let me try to resolve xyz now, and it'll fail because it doesn't exist. This is how the forward lookup works. If we talk about reverse lookup, I tried to resolve 192.168.1.205 and it resolved to the name infra.labs.local because I have an entry over here, var name chroot var named name.192. One more thing you can do is, okay, if I try to resolve 201, it fails because it doesn't exist. Now I'll add it. PTR says pointer or the reverse lookup entry. Please make sure that dot is added at the end. Increase the serial number by 1 and reload the name. Now if I try to resolve 201, it resolves to WinXP. One most important thing that we have failed is chkconfig --list grep named. Whenever you are configuring a new service, make sure that you switch it on. Now you can see that the service will be automatically restarted on all the run levels except 0, 1 and 6. Default my run level should be 3 and it is. So even in case I reboot the machine, the name server will be up. Okay, that's all for today's video. Have a good day. Thanks for viewing.